Yes, I really just love Poe. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be taking all of you on a virtual tour of my library as it is right now. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment at the end. Okay, so first we have Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I first read that book as required reading in my AP Lit class, and I loved it, so I bought it. Next is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. That was also required reading for my AP Government class in my senior year of high school. After that is this trilogy called Rashi's Daughters, and it's historical fiction about the three daughters of the Jewish scholar who went by Rashi. And the reason they're kind of notable or special is because he taught them how to read and write, and he taught them how to be scholars of Jewish theology, which was basically unheard of at the time in medieval France. And I found these at a Jewish food fair because they always have a used book section with a very wide selection of Judaica, which I'm really interested in. So I got these three wonderful books, and they're great. I would highly recommend them. Next, we have a textbook called Reading the World, Ideas That Matter. And that is also a good book because it's just basically a bunch of a collection of essays or short stories by many notable authors. And it just gives a really wide perspective on a bunch of ideas and debates that are talked about today. Next, we have a book that my uncle gave me. It's called Juan Salvador Gaviota, but in English that would translate to Jonathan Livingston Seagull. So next is another required reading book, which is James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. And I feel like it seems like I have a lot of required reading novels in my bookshelf. I just bought them myself afterward because I really enjoyed them and I thought they were a necessary staple in my shelf. So next we have Sonnets from the Portuguese, which I also featured in one of my earlier videos on books with interesting filigrees and spines. And this is a 1940s cover. These next two are Star Trek books, and what those books basically are adaptations of episodes from season 1 and 2 of Star Trek the Original Series, which aired in 1966. And they were really fun to read because they give a lot of more details than they do in the original show. Okay, next, I have my husky, fat, best poems of the English language, which is a collection of poems from Chaucer through Frost, and it was selected by Harold Bloom, and I kept this because it's over 1,000 pages long. It's a pretty good collection of poetry. I used to have a bunch of other anthologies of poetry, but then I realized that a lot of them were kind of repetitive, so I decided to cut it down a little bit and just keep this one. I'm also mildly salty at Harold Bloom because he doesn't like Edgar Allan Poe, and he thinks Edgar Allan Poe is just this really melodramatic, annoying guy, and that makes me sad. Next, we come across my boy, Ray Bradbury. I love Ray Bradbury so much. He's my favorite author. I have two books by him. One is Fahrenheit 451, obviously the classic, and the second one is a collection of his short stories. Next, I have A History of the World in 12 Maps, and I got this book at Costco, funny enough, and it's just basically a book talking about these 12 maps throughout history, like these really famous maps and how they existed and how they came to be and how they influenced the geopolitical sphere and stuff like that. So yeah. The next one is a book that I got as a present from a friend for a Secret Santa. I See You. And if you're watching this, yes, it is right here. It's called The Ancient Greek Historian, and it's just basically documenting the roles that various historians in ancient Grecian times had and the influence they had on historiography, which is the writing of history. Next, we have my lovely copy of Jane Eyre, which I also talked about in my filigree video. This is a reproduction of like an 1800s Victorian edition, I believe, but I'm not sure. So yeah, next, after that, is my very Twilight-looking version of Wuthering Heights. Next is The Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a non-fiction book about archaeology in the Middle East. After that, we have Alice in Wonderland right here, which is also a 1940s binding edition, and the complete works of Lewis Carroll in this volume next to it. Following that, we have Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which was also required reading in my 11th grade English class. And followed by that is another Star Trek book, which is called The Rise and Fall of Khan Noonien Singh. Next are two books by Frederick Douglass. The first one is just a narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and the second one is just a plethora of collected works by him. And I'm sure narrative is in there as well, but sometimes you gotta have some repetition. Next on the list, I have Alexandre Dumas' copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. And yes, this is where that stereotypical adventure novel thing came about. He was the first one to do it. He was the first one to write in a book that somebody dug their way out of prison with a spoon. And that by the time they were done, the actual spoon part wasn't even there anymore, and it was just a handle. Like, no, why would you do that? Anyway, moving on. The last book that I have on this shelf is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I got this as a present from one of my very close friends. I think she gave it to me for my birthday in 7th grade or 8th grade. Okay, so for these next two shelves, we're gonna start on the letter D, and we will continue until we get to the letter P. So the first book that we have is Devotions Upon Emergent Occasions by John Donne. And I bought this book very recently because I read that John Donne had written it when he had the Black Death, or he thought he had the Black Death. And he was in quarantine, and he was basically like, oh my gosh, my life is horrible, I'm gonna die. And I thought it would be an appropriate thing to read in the time that we're living in right now. And I've made my way partially through it, but then summer reading happened, and my school decided that they were going to be mean to me and send me like 4 books to read this summer. So I haven't gotten that much further on it. Next, I have As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, also something that I've read pretty recently. After that, we have the classic Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I have also read that pretty recently. I'm just now realizing that I've read a bunch of books pretty recently because I haven't had that much to do. After that, we have my infamous and beloved Lord of the Flies by William Golding. After that, we have William Goldman's beloved Princess Bride, followed by Hadawi's translation of the Arabian Nights. This is followed by Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, and then after that we have Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I think I like Brave New World a little bit more than 1984 actually, but that's an unpopular opinion. I'm sorry. Next is a book called The Missing Kennedy, and this book is about one of John F. Kennedy's sisters who suffered with mental disabilities. And this book is actually signed by the author because I went to go listen to her at my neighborhood library. After that, I have To Kill a Mockingbird and Go Sit a Watchman. This is followed by the actual book version of The Phantom of the Opera. I think Andrew Lloyd Webber really captured the mood of the book in the musical. Next is C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. This book was recommended to me, and so I purchased it and I read it. After that is a version in Spanish of Martin Luther's Commentaries. I haven't gotten to that one yet because it's a little bit daunting, because Martin Luther in Spanish, and I haven't gotten to that one yet because it's Martin Luther in Spanish, so that's going to take a little bit of time to get through. Up here we have, oh, you can't see that. Up here we have a somewhat older looking copy of Moby Dick, which I am currently reading. It is very thick. Herman Melville goes on a lot of rants, just like Victor Hugo and Leo Tolstoy do, and it's kind of annoying. After that is another one of my summer reading books entitled Toxic Communities, and it is about environmental racism, industrial pollution, and residential mobility. And the last book that is up here is an old hymnal that my grandma gave me from 1966. It's in a very fragile condition, which is why it has tape on it, because super glue did not work. She confirmed it. After Martin Luther's Commentaries, we have this book right here, which is a collection of plays by Christopher Marlowe and William Shakespeare. Followed by that is my 2 copies of 100 Years of Solitude, because I love that book, and it is one of my favorite books. And the reason I have 2 copies is because one is in English and one is in Spanish, and I have read them both, and I can confirm that the English translation is excellent. It's identical in mood, in style, in tone to the Spanish version. Followed by this is my last Star Trek book, which is called The Voyage Home. And that is the book adaptation of that one movie with the whales. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. This is followed by my cottagecore-esque Anne of Green Gables full boxed set collection. After that, I have The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which I also read this summer, followed by Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And after that, I have The Dead Feminists by Michelle O'Leary. That's a great book. It's just basically a bunch of kind of cartoon / comic strips / printed art on dead notable women throughout history. After that, I have The Library Book by Susan Orlean. After that, we have Orwell, both Animal Farm and 1984. And after that, I have 6 centuries of great poetry. I think I said earlier that I only have 1 poetry anthology. Then I decided that 1 was not enough, so I had to keep the 2nd one. And now I'm kind of wondering if I should keep the 3rd one. After that, we have my favorite children's book, which is Fairy Tales from Eastern Europe, which was compiled by Neil Phillip. This is just a beautiful collection of Slavic folklore and fairy tales, mostly from Russia, Ukraine, and other Slavic countries. And it's really interesting to see the difference between the way they tell their fairy tales and the way we see it in more Western kind of traditions. After that, we have Americans' favorite poems. I feel silly now because I had just gone through saying that I only had 1 anthology of poetry. But here I am having 2 more. I don't remember why I want to keep this one. I just might. After that, we are followed by my beloved Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, so now we are at the bottom of my bookshelf. I know you can see that there's a 4th shelf down here. I don't have anywhere else to put another bookshelf, so once I run out of space here, this is it. Trying as hard as I can to keep my books to this minimum right here. Up here we have an annotated guide to great artists. And these artists mostly span the Western tradition of art because Eurocentrism is a thing. And it has proved to be very useful in my art history class, actually. Underneath that, we have my Time magazine of secret societies from the time when I went through my Illuminati phase and conspiracy theory phase. Underneath that is Haig's famous The Book of Fairies. And after that, we have my very weathered but well-loved Scholastic Atlas. To this day, I still identify countries by whatever color they were. Anyway, to the actual books on the shelf. Let's get to that. We have the lovely copy of The Travels of Marco Polo, which I got for like $1 in a thrift store. Yes. Chaim Potok's The Chosen. We have Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. After that, we have our beloved Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, who wrote this when she was 17 years old. We have Catherine Stockett's The Help, followed by Alfred Lord Tennyson's selected poems. After this, we have the behemoth Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. After this, we have Night by Elie Wiesel. This was required reading when I was in 8th grade. We are followed by, of course, we all knew it had to come up at some time, The Picture of Dorian Gray by our very dapper Oscar Wilde. This is followed by Soul Survivor by Philip Yancey and The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. The movie is very good as well. It's not one of those scenarios where you're like, oh my god, this movie is so bad. Who would even think of making this? No. The movie was also excellent. After this, I'm going to turn my camera around now. And then there's this book. This book is basically an Oxford RSV Bible that includes Apocrypha. And then it turned out that it was going to be a textbook for his class. So I saved myself some money. Thank you, random person who donated this book, because now I don't have to buy it. Here is another Bible that belonged to my dad. It is bilingual. Here is my Strong's Dictionary and Concordance of the Bible, which has both Hebraic and Greek references. After that is my book on Egyptology. It's called Unwrapping the Pharaohs. Yeah. After that, there's my Rose book of Bible charts, maps, and timelines. After that is my taxonomic charts of theology and biblical studies. And this is basically a history book of my denomination, followed by this book on the Bible Illuminated. And that title is inaccurate because it's not actually about the Bible. And this title is inaccurate. It's not actually about the Bible. It's more about illuminated manuscripts and books of prayer that existed and were very popular during the medieval period. So that is all for today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video, and let me know in the comments if there are any books you think I should add to my library. I would love to read them when I have the time. So yeah, that's all for today. Bye!